We often imagine the prehistoric world as a silent movie, dominated by the visual spectacle of predators like Tyrannosaurus rex. But the Mesozoic was not silent. It vibrated with sound. And its master musician was not a carnivore, but a gentle herbivore, Parasaurolophus. Once dismissed as a generic dinosaur with a weird head ornament, we now know it was a living biological trombone. It didn't just wander the Cretaceous. It filled it with the most haunting symphony in the history of life. The scientific journey to understand Parasaurolophus began in the rugged Badlands of Alberta, Canada, in the early 1920s. When the first skull was pulled from the rock, it presented a puzzle that would baffle paleontologists for nearly a century. Protruding from the back of its skull was a magnificent, tube-like crest. It was longer than the skull itself, sweeping backward in a graceful, curved arc. In the early days of paleontology, this structure became a canvas for the wildest imaginations of the scientific community. The theories proposed ranged from the plausible to the absurd. Some early researchers suggested it was a weapon, a bludgeon used to strike rivals during mating contests or to fend off predators. However, closer inspection of the fossilized bone revealed that the crest was hollow and remarkably fragile. A single violent impact would have shattered it, likely causing fatal damage to the animal. Another theory, one that persisted in textbooks and museum murals for decades, was the snorkel hypothesis. Because Parasaurolophus fossils were often found in association with ancient river deltas and swamps, scientists speculated that the animal was amphibious. They painted a picture of the dinosaur submerged deep underwater to escape the jaws of terrestrial predators, with only the tip of its crest poking above the surface to draw breath. It was an elegant idea, but it was anatomically impossible. The tip of the crest is completely solid bone. There is no opening, no blowhole, and no way for air to enter from the top. If a Parasaurolophus had attempted to use its headgear as a snorkel, it would have drowned. Others suggested it was a sophisticated nose for smelling, or perhaps a glandular sac for storing salt. It wasn't until technology caught up with curiosity that the truth was revealed. When researchers finally subjected the skull to computed tomography, or CT scanning, they were able to peer inside the bone without damaging it. What they found was a marvel of biological engineering. The crest was not a solid horn, nor was it a simple storage tank. It was a labyrinth. The nasal passages did not go straight from the nostrils to the lungs. Instead, they traveled up from the nose, entered the base of the crest, and looped all the way to the top. At the apex of the crest, the tubes made a sharp U-turn, traveling all the way back down to the base of the skull before finally heading to the throat. Nature had elongated the animal's airway by several feet, folding it inside a protective casing of bone. There is only one reason physics dictates such a design: to manipulate sound. The animal was carrying a resonance chamber on top of its head. To truly appreciate the genius of the Parasaurolophus design, one must look at the brass section of an orchestra. Instruments like the trombone, the tuba, or the pipe organ operate on a fundamental principle of acoustics. The longer the tube, the deeper the pitch, and the more resonant the sound. By forcing air through this elongated, convoluted nasal passage, Parasaurolophus became a living wind instrument. It could generate sounds that were far beyond the capabilities of a standard reptile or mammal of its size. In a landmark study in the 1990s, paleontologist David Weishampel took the digital scans of the internal structure of the crest and created a computer simulation to model the airflow. He effectively built a virtual Parasaurolophus and blew air through it. The result was a sound that humanity had not heard for 75 million years. It was not the high-pitched shriek or the reptilian hiss often used in movies. It was a deep, mournful, brassy bellow. It resonated with a rich, hollow tone, sounding like a blend between a foghorn, the call of an elephant, and the moan of a blue whale. It was a sound designed to carry. But the audible sound was only the tip of the iceberg. The length of the tube allowed Parasaurolophus to produce infrasound. These are ultra-low frequency sound waves that fall below the threshold of human hearing. Infrasound is a superpower in the animal kingdom. It is currently used by elephants to communicate across the vast distances of the African savanna and by cassowaries in the dense rainforests of New Guinea. Unlike high-frequency sounds, which are easily scattered by trees, rocks, and uneven terrain, infrasound waves are long and powerful. They can travel for miles through dense vegetation without losing their energy. They can even travel through the ground. This means that a herd of Parasaurolophus could effectively stay in constant communication while dispersed through a thick Cretaceous forest. They could talk to one another without ever seeing each other, their voices passing through the trunks of giant redwoods and conifers as if they weren't even there. The investment of so much biological energy into a communication device tells us something profound about the animal. Parasaurolophus lived in a highly complex society. Solitary animals do not need trombones on their heads. Only animals that rely on the cohesion of a group for survival evolve such elaborate mechanisms to talk to one another. The fossil record supports this social structure. We see clear evidence of sexual dimorphism and ontogeny, the changes an animal undergoes as it grows, in the crests. We have found skulls with different crest shapes. Some are long, thick, and deeply curved. Others are shorter and more slightly built. For a long time, these were thought to be different species. Now, we understand they likely represent males, females, and juveniles. The adult males likely possess the largest, longest crests. This implies they had the deepest voices, much like a stag with the largest antlers, or a lion with the darkest mane. The male with the deepest, loudest call may have been the dominant individual. His voice would have served a dual purpose. To rivals, it was a display of strength and lung capacity, a sonic keep-out sign. To females, it was a display of genetic fitness. The females and juveniles, with their shorter, straighter crests, would have produced higher-pitched calls. This creates a picture of a herd that sounded like a choir, with different individuals occupying different sonic ranges. A mother could likely distinguish the specific call of her offspring from the rest of the herd, and a calf could recognize the reassuring rumble of its mother. This acoustic network acted as an invisible shield. In the visually obstructed world of the late Cretaceous forests, a predator could lurk only a few dozen meters away and remain unseen. But they could not easily hide from sound. If one Parasaurolophus on the perimeter of the herd smelled a predator or heard the snap of a twig, it could emit a low-frequency alarm call. This warning would ripple through the forest instantly. The rest of the herd would feel the vibration in their chests before they even registered the danger consciously. It was a wireless alert system, allowing the group to react as a single cohesive organism fleeing before the predator even launched its attack. This acoustic unity was their primary defense in a world ruled by monsters. While the crest gets all the attention, the rest of the Parasaurolophus was a marvel of biological engineering in its own right. To power a body that could weigh up to 3 tons and a voice that could shake the ground, the animal needed fuel. It needed to be an eating machine. Parasaurolophus belonged to the group of dinosaurs known as hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs. The term duck-billed is somewhat misleading, implying a soft, flat beak for dabbling in water. In reality, the beak of Parasaurolophus was a cropping tool, covered in a hard sheath of keratin. It was sharp and precise, designed to strip leaves, needles, and twigs from branches with ruthless efficiency. But the real magic happened inside the mouth. Unlike mammals, which have a single row of teeth that must last a lifetime or be replaced once, hadrosaurs evolved a system known as dental batteries. Inside the jaws of a Parasaurolophus were columns of teeth packed so tightly together they formed a solid pavement of dental surface. There could be hundreds of teeth in a single jaw, with only the top surface exposed for grinding. Beneath each active tooth were multiple replacement teeth waiting in reserve. As the animal chewed tough, fibrous vegetation, the top teeth would wear down, and new bone and tooth material would be pushed up from below to replace them. This system allowed Parasaurolophus to exploit a food source that many other herbivores couldn't handle. The Cretaceous period was dominated by gymnosperms, conifers, cycads, and ginkgos. These plants are tough, fibrous, and full of hard needles and woody tissues. Sauropods, the long-necked giants, dealt with this by swallowing vegetation whole and letting it ferment in massive stomachs for days. Parasaurolophus took a different approach. It processed its food in the mouth. Its jaws were capable of a complex grinding motion known as pleurokinesis. When the animal bit down, the bones of its upper jaw could actually flex outwards, allowing the dental batteries to grind against each other with a shearing action. This pulverized the tough plant matter into a fine pulp before it was even swallowed. This meant digestion was faster and more efficient, allowing the animal to extract maximum energy from low-quality food. This voracious appetite and efficient processing fueled a massive body. Parasaurolophus was a facultative biped. It spent most of its time walking on all fours, browsing on low-lying vegetation. But when it needed speed, it could rear up on its powerful hind legs and run. It was not a sluggish swamp dweller. It was an active, dynamic animal capable of bursts of significant speed, powered by the most advanced chewing system evolution had ever produced. The world of Parasaurolophus was not a peaceful Eden. It lived in the Dinosaur Park and Kaiparowitz formations of North America, roughly 76 to 73 million years ago. These environments were teeming with life, but also with death. The density of large animals in these regions was staggering. Parasaurolophus had to compete for food and space with other armored giants. It walked alongside the horned Centrosaurus and Styracosaurus, animals that carried spears on their faces. It shared the plains with the club-tailed Euoplocephalus. In this crowd of heavily armed herbivores, Parasaurolophus stood out for its lack of physical weaponry. It had no horns, no spikes, no club, and no armor. It was a soft target. This made it a prime menu item for the apex predators of the time. While the famous Tyrannosaurus rex appeared a few million years later, Parasaurolophus faced ancestors and cousins of the tyrant king that were nearly as terrifying. Predators like Gorgosaurus and Daspletosaurus were the rulers of this ecosystem. They were 3-ton killing machines with bone-crushing jaws and sophisticated senses of smell. For a Parasaurolophus, survival was a game of constant vigilance. Its life was defined by the relationship between its senses and its predators. Its eyes were placed high and wide on its skull, giving it a near 360-degree field of view to spot movement. But it was the crest that likely tipped the balance. The internal structure of the crest connected to the inner ears. Some paleontologists speculate that the crest didn't just produce sound. It may have acted as a giant resonance receiver, amplifying incoming low-frequency sounds. This would mean Parasaurolophus could hear the infrasonic vibrations of a predator's footfalls long before the predator came into visual range. It was a high-stakes evolutionary arms race. The tyrannosaurs were evolving to be faster, stronger, and smarter. In response, Parasaurolophus didn't evolve thicker skin or sharper claws. It evolved better communication. It bet its survival on the idea that a unified, alert herd is stronger than any individual warrior. For millions of years, the strategy worked. The Hadrosaurs were among the most successful dinosaur groups to ever walk the Earth, spreading across continents and diversifying into countless forms. The forests of the Cretaceous were filled with their low-frequency rumbles, a constant, thrumming song of life. But evolution cannot prepare a species for astrophysics. 66 million years ago, a rock the size of Mount Everest, traveling at 20 times the speed of a bullet, slammed into the shallow waters of what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact didn't just kill the animals in the immediate vicinity. It broke the climate mechanism of the entire planet. The initial blast wave and the rain of molten rock started fires that consumed entire continents. But the true killer was the darkness. The dust and soot thrown into the atmosphere blocked out the sun for months, perhaps years. Photosynthesis stopped. The lush forests of conifers and ferns, the fuel that powered the massive bodies of the Parasaurolophus, withered and died. The dental batteries that could grind the toughest wood were useless when there was nothing left to eat. The acoustic network that could warn of a stalking predator was meaningless when the enemy was starvation and cold. The great herds, which had survived by communication and cooperation, were fragmented. The songs of the males, once used to attract mates and define territories, echoed into a dying world with no one left to answer. The specialized adaptations that had made them masters of their environment, their size, their metabolism, their complex social needs, became their undoing. Within a geological heartbeat, the symphony ended. The silence that followed was absolute. The great biological trombones were buried in the mud, waiting for 75 million years to be found by a species that would use machines to finally hear their song again. Parasaurolophus proves that dinosaurs were not just mindless monsters, but complex social creatures whose survival depended on community and the voices of family. These fossils are not silent statues. They are recordings of a lost world. They remind us that long before our own music existed, the Earth was already singing. If you enjoyed this journey into the prehistoric soundscape, be sure to subscribe to Extinct Echoes, and let us know in the comments. If you could travel back in time, would you choose to hear the roar of a T-Rex, or the haunting chorus of a Parasaurolophus heard at dawn?